So now let's discuss monitoring the communications. After we have explained monitor the stakeholder engagement, now it's the time to jump into monitoring the communication. So to start with monitoring the communication is one of these important, um, uh, key processes. Um, it's not just about sending emails or holding meetings. Project communication isn't about just having all of these formal or informal ways of communication. It's about ensuring the right message reaches the right audience in the most effective way. Monitoring communication effectiveness involves assessing whether the stakeholder receives and understands the information needed to make the informed decisions. Effective communication ensures that the project information is delivered accurately and efficiently to the stakeholders. And again, to monitor this communication process, it focuses on evaluating the communication effectiveness and making necessary adjustment to meet the stakeholder needs. Remember that poor communication can lead to issues and challenges like misalignment or stakeholder dissatisfaction and project delays. The key ITTOs here we are gonna have is the inputs, including the communication plans, which it's part of the project management plan, the project documents, work performance data, EFFs, the OPAs, and tools and techniques. Here we have is the expert judgment, project management information systems that can be used to, let's say, to push or to pull these messages or let's say project updates or reports, data analysis. We all of these tools are well known to us now. So outputs here includes the work performance information, the change request in case that you need to tailor or change any of these communication preferences to any of these stakeholders, project management plan updates in case that you need to do one of these updates on the project communication plan, and project document updates. It's very important, as we mentioned, to ensure that the project communications are aligned with the stakeholder needs. So again, different stakeholders have different communication preferences. While executives may prefer, for example, high-level status report. On the other hand, you have the technical teams, which might require a very detailed specification. So the communication management plan here ensures that the project delivers the right information to the right audience through the right channels. If you recall, when we were collecting the stakeholder communication requirements, when we were developing the engagement plan and communication plan, so stakeholder communication requirements, it's a process where you need to collect information to tailor the communication preferences or needs or methods to different stakeholder groups. We also talked about these different communication styles, including the formal or versus informal, uh, or push and pull information. So all of these you need to understand based on the stakeholder needs, and based on that you make your communication tailored to their needs. The communication management plan, where it defines how the information is distributed and reviewed, which I mentioned when we talked about one of these inputs, which is the communication management plan, where we have defined it on the planning phase. So now, in case that you have found any stakeholder who is not satisfied with this communication management plan, or to collect the new feedback from the stakeholders to ensure that your let's say communications are tailored based on the stakeholder needs. How to evaluate the communication effectiveness or methods? So not all of these communication methods are effective for every audience, and by regularly evaluating these communication methods or techniques, it ensures that the stakeholder receives the information in the ways that keep them engaged and informed, including surveys or feedback loops. Let's say sometimes you may have an advanced engagement analytics to help you determine what works the best. So to evaluate these communication, again, effectiveness that you and your stakeholders are performing is having, let's say, message clarity questions by using these metrics, including the message clarity by asking yourself or the stakeholders, are these messages were clear and understood? Also, the timelines, is the information were delivered on the time that's need or supposed to be delivered? Also, the engagement level, are the stakeholders, you can ask yourself, are the stakeholders responding and acting on the information that you as a project manager is sharing with them? You may also conduct communication audits by regularly, let's say, evaluating whether the communication strategies are working. And to talk about monitoring the miscommunication or managing the miscommunication risks, miscommunication can drill project by creating misunderstanding, misalignment, missed deadlines, and stakeholder frustrations. And by proactively managing these risks in terms of communication, using a standardized messaging, it ensures the clarity and encourage active listening. The teams can here minimize the communication breakdowns and misalignment. And to talk about these common causes of miscommunication, when we talked about the ambiguity, where you have no clear messages or your messages isn't, let's say, clear enough to tailor based on the stakeholder needs or stakeholder type. When we talked about these stakeholders or when identifying or mapping these stakeholders, for example, by maybe technical level, maybe you have non-technical stakeholders and you have shared with them a message that is full of technical concepts. So that has clear or created an ambiguity to them. So one of these causes again is ambiguity by having vague or unclear messages. Next, you have the information, one of these miscommunication common causes, which is information overload. When you have too much, let's say, data without having a clear structure, so this will create again a miscommunication between you and the stakeholders. So you need to have a well-defined structure based on the stakeholder needs. What else we have here? We have the channel mismatch, and channel mismatch is like using the wrong medium for a specific audience. Maybe some of these audience prefer to have a phone call over than having reading a very long email. So it's important again to tailor your communication methods or technique to ensure that it meets the stakeholder needs. And some of these mitigation strategies to let's say to mitigate or to resolve these let's say common causes miscommunication issues. Here we have to use active listening, also standardized templates, and finally here to have a regular confirmation on understanding. Let's take an example here. Do you when we talked about the agile development and the agile let's say sprints or ceremonies where you have a Scrum framework, you have this agile development team which implemented daily stand-up meeting, and daily stand-up meeting is one of these important event that is used within agile teams. By utilizing the Scrum framework, they have the daily stand-up meeting to clarify the expectations and to reduce the risks of mis communication, leading to a better coordination. Gathering and utilizing the feedback loops for communication improvement. So when we're talking about how to understand whether you are meeting the communication, let's say, and engagement needs of your stakeholders. We talked about utilizing and gathering a feedback from these stakeholders. So, project communication should be iterative by constantly improving based on the stakeholder feedback. By actively collecting and analyzing the feedback, you as a project manager can adjust the communication strategy to enhance the clarity and the engagement and effectiveness. And the key tools here we have discovered, including the stakeholder feedback surveys by measuring the communication satisfaction. Also, we have the lessons learned reviews from the previous project, and also documenting your lessons learned um, to document, let's say, the best communication or the successful communication methods that were already implemented in past projects to deal with a certain stakeholder, or for the future project that you are advising the next teams who's gonna deal with these stakeholders to communicate, but let's say with this stakeholders within this let's say method or tool or technique. Also, adaptive, let's say, communication strategy. So, as we mentioned, that it's an iterative process where you need to be an adaptive and adapt, let's say, these communication needs and strategies based on the stakeholder needs and expectations by modifying these communication plans based on the feedback. Let's look now into one of these common, let's say, key tools when monitoring the communication effectiveness. So, using the right tools enhances the communication effectiveness. Project managers must choose the tools that align with the stakeholder needs and project complexity, ensuring that the communication remains transparent, efficient, and valuable. So to start with, the first tool here we have is the RASI matrix. RASI matrix, it defines the communication roles and responsibilities. We have also performance dashboards to provide a real-time project updates. It's very important to choose wisely your collaboration tool. Like when we talked about Microsoft Teams for meeting, Slack, messaging, also Jira for dashboards and update, Trello for streamlined communication. So it's very important to understand the stakeholder preferences and choosing the communication method or let's say tool or technology to ensure that you have tailored your approach to meet their collaboration tools, techniques, and needs. Finally, we have the sentiment analysis. Sentiment analysis, it might not be used widely, but it's an AI-driven tools to assess the stakeholder sentiment communication. Like, for example, how many times the stakeholder has shake their, let's say, head, how many times they smiled, how many times they showed that they were, let's say, confused or angry about something within your project. So it's called a sentiment analysis to analyze, let's say, the stakeholder, let's say, behavior within a meeting, within or within, let's say, a conversation. Here again, some of these challenges that you as a project manager might face when monitoring the communication effectiveness. So, communication challenges sometimes can be avoided in complex projects. By recognizing these challenges early and implementing a structured solutions, teams can maintain and mitigate the alignment and ensures the alignment and prevent communication breakdowns. These challenges includes the remote and virtual teams. As you know that most of the, or let's say not most, but there are many projects nowadays running on different time zones and different cultures. So all of these remote and virtual teams challenges, including the different time zones and cultural differences, is one of these very important communication, let's say, challenges that we are facing nowadays. So sure to tailor your, let's say, project updates communication to meet, let's say, these different time zones and the cultural differences, for example, using a certain language or certain keywords that can be avoided. So this can be one of these challenges that you need to consider when monitoring the communication effectiveness. Also, the information silos and by lack of information sharing between the departments. So again, that's why we talked about ensuring that the message is delivered to the stakeholders and acknowledged. And by acknowledging or let's say motivating these stakeholders to acknowledge your messages, you you enhance this communication, let's say two-way communication. You enhance you motivate these stakeholders to have two-way communication to avoid having information silos. Sometimes you might also face one of these challenges where there is the resistant to feedback, which is like stakeholders who are unwilling to change their communication habits. We always love to talk about continuous improvement in project, let's say, activities, and in this time we'll talk about project communication. So communication strategies should evolve with the project. By measuring the effectiveness and conducting retrospectives in agile project and providing an ongoing training, teams can continuously refine their communication methods to improve their collaboration and clarity. And it's important to have to understand like what is your communication is doing. Is it doing good? Is it doing bad? So it's important to establish communication KPIs to measure the effectiveness of the project communication. For example, you might set a KPI where you have sent, let's say, 10 messages, and nine of them were acknowledged, where you have, let's say, 10% out of your communication needs an improvement. So this is how you establish a KPI. For example, maybe the feedback loop or the feedback, let's say, frequency between you and the stakeholders. Also, the one of these KPIs that you can implement is the stakeholder satisfaction. For example, on communication, this is in terms of establishing a communication KPIs. When it comes to the retrospectives, and this retrospectives is one of these ceremonies where agile scrum team conduct the lessons learned to learn what they have done good, what they have done bad, and they start collecting data, and they establish one, let's say, a table that it has to do more or to avoid doing more. So these agile teams hold sprint retrospectives to refine their communications, let's say to enhance their communication or to resolve any issue that were faced within the sprint planning or within sprint itself that were, let's say, caused by miscommunication. Also, to ensure having continuous improvement in your project communication is by training and coaching. Remember that ongoing training for better communication skills, it helps you and the stakeholders all also to keep communicated in a more efficient way. Let's look now at one of these best practices for having an effective project communication. So, best practices in communication revolve around clarity, engagement, and adaptability. And by keeping the communication concise and using visual aids and encouraging open dialogue, teams can, let's say, enhance the stakeholder understanding and satisfaction and support. And to start with talking about keep it concise. So what does it mean with keeping it concise? It's just simple as that. Avoid overloading the information or the stakeholders with unnecessary information. Using the visuals, we all know what does it mean with using visuals like the charts or infographics or dashboards to enhance the clarity and to enhance also the transparency between you and the stakeholders. And encouraging an open dialogue by fostering an environment where the stakeholders feel that they are comfortable when sharing their concerns and needs. And to summarize our session on monitoring the communication effectiveness as part of monitoring and controlling process group, we say that monitoring the communication effectiveness and managing it's continuous process that involves tailoring your strategies, leveraging technology, and ensuring the alignment with the stakeholder needs and expectations. By constantly evaluating and refining the communication practices, teams can prevent the misunderstanding, can improve the collaboration, and drive the project success. We also talked about ensuring the clarity and consistency and engagement within your messages to ensure that the right messages reaches the right people at the right time.